explain our code so everyone understands it. In the interim, if anyone wants to speak, please come up and sign in. I'm going to ask around. Michael?
When we were here last month, I made some introductory comments to try to orient the public as to where we are, what the role of the planning board is, and what this public hearing is about. So let me try to repeat some of those again. There are multiple boards in the village that have a role in the land use process. One of those is the village board. It is the village board that the elected officials, the legislative body, makes decisions regarding what is in the zoning ordinance, what uses are allowed, what zones they're allowed in, and what requirements apply, we call them bulk requirements, apply to those uses, lot size, setback, so on and so forth. The planning board does not make that determination. And once the village board has made a determination that a use is permitted in a particular zoning district, the planning board may not second guess that determination that that use fits in and is appropriate for that district itself.
Michael, I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
All right, I'll try to stand closer and speak as loud as I can. I got a bit of a cold. If a particular use does not satisfy the bulk requirements, setback, lot size, then there's another board of the village called the zoning board that can grant variances and forgive non-compliance with those issues. Different. The planning board looks at projects that come before it. First determines whether or not the use is allowed in the district. Next determines whether or not it meets the bulk requirements of the code. And then it has its consultants, its engineer review the project. And if there are issues regarding water, sewer, and the like, there can be a discussion, a give and take with the applicant, and those issues can be addressed. The idea is to make a better and a more pleasing layout for the citizens of the village. But once that is done, it's the planning board's role to process the application and to approve those that fit the scheme of the ordinance. One of the things the planning board has to look at is the impacts on the community and the environmental impacts. Now, the particular property that this public hearing is dealing with this evening, and I'm sure most of you are aware where it is, it's the old baby place that's on the corner of North Church Street and West Street. That property is located in the CS, the Central Shopping District of the Village of Goshen. Of course, immediately across the street, residential zoning districts begin. The area of the CS zoning district includes a portion of North Church Street, most of West Main Street, and a good portion of Greenwich Avenue. And as you can tell, the character of those areas vary tremendously. For instance, most of West Main Street has buildings built right up to the property line, sharing a common wall or wall against wall. The character of Greenwich is a throwback to a time when it was mostly residential, with houses with larger front yard setbacks and significant side yard setbacks. The village, recognizing that not all of that jives, needed to decide how to handle existing buildings in those areas of the village that don't comply with setbacks. So it has a provision of the code that says that if a building that's called a non-complying building has existed in this village since before the zoning ordinance began, or the magic date of, get back to it here, I think it's in here. Well, it's, March 9th, 1998, thank you. Those buildings are permitted to continue on without getting a variance from the bulk requirements, simply because to require them to get variances, which would nearly always have to be granted, except if the building was torn down. Now, if someone wants to enlarge one of those buildings, then they have to comply with code or get variances. So the idea is buildings that exist on March 9, 1998 are permitted to continue and need not comply with the bulk requirements. That includes setback, off-street parking, and the like. Now, to be sure that we're not seeing a dramatic change in the use, what the planning board is required to do is look at the uses that existed in that building on March 9th, 1998, look at the bulk requirements for those uses, and then look at what is proposed today. And if what existed within the bulk table compliance on that date lines up with what is proposed today, then that building and the new uses are permitted to continue. If there's a dramatic difference or change, then the applicant must comply. Now, earlier in the proceedings, the applicant had submitted those materials, the bulk table that showed the uses in 1998 and the bulk table compliance that is required today, and those materials are before the planning board. Next comes the requirement of when site plan approval is required. And though it's an issue that's now been resolved by determining that site plan approval will be required, the village requires site plan approval whenever there's a change in use, even if there's no new construction, that affects the certain trigger events, like parking, drainage, and the like. So site plan approval will be required for this project here tonight. Now, tonight, what's going to happen is the applicant's representatives will make a presentation, describe the project and the area. When that is done, we will collect the sign-in list, and the chairman will go down the list, asking those that wish to address the board, please come forward and speak. What we'd ask you to do, because I'm yelling to reach you, is for you to either come forward so the board can hear you, or raise your voice as loud as you can. I know it's crowded. It will be hard for you to get up. The primary purpose of the hearing is for you to deliver your comments to the board. Naturally, you will have some questions. Some of them will be inquiries, some of them, I'm sure, will be rhetorical. But to the extent that it's easy to do, if there's a question that can be easily answered, either the applicant's representative or a member of the consultant team or a member of the planning board will try to answer that question. When the public hearing is concluded, the board can close the hearing and take action, or delay this to another event if there are another evening if there are outstanding items. So with that introduction, I turn it back to the chair.
Thank you, Mike. I'd like to open up the public hearing July 20th at 7:25, 7:40. Do we have that list? Pass out, please. Do we have that list? Someone have it in the back?
Ready to pass.
It's still right. Who was the first one to put the name down?
You want to start with the applicant first?
Well, I just want to see who was the first person.
Okay. There we go.
Thank you. All right, before we start the public hearing, I would like to say we received several letters from residents and business people of the community. We're going to have all these letters put into the minutes. The applicant, this is the public hearing is on Kelly Jean, 145 North Church Street, within the CS and ADD district. Presenting the applicant.
My name is Steve Esposito, Esposito Associates, with Tad Barone, attorney for the applicant. What I'd like to do, Mr. Chairman, is first talk a little bit about the history of the process. There were several outside agencies that this board had asked us to seek review by, review those first, and then I'd like to go into the zoning and planning issues, and then ultimately the proposed renovations to the building. And then at that time, we could open it up.
Can everyone hear Mr. Esposito?
I think if you want to hear me, you need to turn the air conditioning down. Off, actually. It's right behind. The application before you is a mixed-use application. It's an existing building. We own the building. It's what we call, affectionately call it the baby place. I actually call it Bromley's. For those of us that have been around for a while, you remember that also. Mary and Peter still in the building. They've been trying to sell that building for quite some time. We all know they've retired. And Kelly English, the applicant, born and raised in Goshen.